Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to why half of this country lives on one tiny island. I think I mentioned this place 2 days ago because I didn't do videos yesterday. But the day before that I mentioned this country and this city and how this city just blows my mind. I think I saw like one video of someone like vlogging through the city. I was just fascinated by it. And yeah, these like interesting places where people live. For example, this city, which is looking like a big city that could be in any country, on this island in the middle of nowhere. And I just find it really fascinating. But I don't really know the history of how it was. I assume this video will sort of go through everything to do with this place. But yeah, we're going to check this out. Hopefully, you're going to enjoy. Links are in the description to my Patreon, where you can see reactions that I can't post to YouTube. But let's check this out and see why people live here and how they moved here and all that sort of stuff.
Why is there such a massive city on this tiny island in the middle of the ocean? I thought small islands were supposed to be deserted, the place you go to mine bird poo or dump your garbage. But this island, Malay, has a population of about 210,000, with some estimates going up to 250,000. And look at it. It's the world's densest island. Well, densest if you ignore islands with only a couple hundred or thousand people living on them. And those that don't actually act like islands. These don't act like islands. You can literally drive to them. If we're talking about large, built-up, well-established islands that actually act like islands, aka only accessible by boat or plane, then Malay is our winner. The city itself holds around...
This is a cool view. So I guess this is like a football pitch. This would be like an athletics thing. It's just so fascinating. Like they've got their own road system. I guess this is like the major road going through the city. This is going round. Is this an airport? I don't know. I guess there's a few parks. I don't think they've really got enough space for parks, to be honest. But there's one here. I guess this might be a school.
109,000 people for every square kilometer, or around 9 square meters for every person. That's only this much space, which also makes it the most dense city on Earth, at least according to Wikipedia's outdated numbers. And a little fun fact about the city, it's the capital of the Maldives, a country made completely of these small, flat, ring-shaped islands called atolls in the middle of the Indian Ocean, ranging from large rural islands with tons of nature.
Oh, so there's just loads of islands that people live in. I thought this is the island that just, like, I guess it is where most of the people live. But I didn't realise there were so many different islands that will have different cities. So their form of transport for their country is just boats. Which obviously does make sense, but...
To tourist traps, to uninhabited jungles, to incredibly dense steel-built mazes. That's the Maldives for you. But where is Malay in all of these islands? I'll give you a second to guess. Maybe it's this one. Yeah, this one looks nice and big. Nope. Malay is this tiny one right here, with a length of 1.9 by...
So there's this here, and then there's just another island here, and then this is the airport, I guess. I don't know, to be honest, I'm not sure. Oh, there's loads nearby then.
By 1.2 kilometers, it is not large at all. Quite the opposite. Here's Malay compared to Monaco, and to Central Park, and to Singapore. Looks like an ant. And yet it holds over 40% of the nation's population. But in the 1920s, the city had only around 5,000 residents, a much more appropriate amount for its size. In 2000, only a quarter of Maldivians lived in the capital, not nearly half. So people have been living in Malay for over 1,000 years, but it's never been this massive. Why the sudden boom to become the most dominant island in the country and the densest city on Earth? Well, I have a two-part theory. One part is the things the city has, and the second is just sheer coincidence. Let's take a little tour of the city. A street view and top-down tour of the city at least. Along the incredibly packed streets and layers of buildings, you'll find most things a normal city has.
So what I learned about this city is basically everyone uses bikes, which does make sense because if you have a car in this type of city, it's just, I mean, people do have cars, I think, like for deliveries and stuff. But you're just taking up a lot of space for these small little roads, right?
Shops, restaurants, houses, parks, sewage that dumps waste into the ocean, and a desalination plant for clean water. Okay, maybe those last two are a little more reminiscent of Dubai than an average city, but what makes Malay so special is what it has that the rest of the country doesn't. Things we all think are essential. The two largest hospitals in the country, the largest airport, in fact, with the largest seaplane operation on Earth, the
Seaplane.
largest university in the Maldives,
Damn.
the largest port, shipping operation, and fish market, the oldest and largest mosques, and despite the beautiful image of the country, surprisingly bad beaches. Oh, and yeah, the government too. The government is in Malay. Why do they pick this island? Well, honestly, just because the old sultans called this island home.
Here's a weird question, man. I don't know if this is possible, but people who live here, let's just say over the age of 18, I wonder if there's anyone who lives on this island that has never left this island. If there's over 200,000 people, I'm sure there are many people that haven't left this island, which is crazy to think, but that probably is the case.
And when medieval Islamic traders came to the Maldives, this island is where they built the first mosques in the country, like the Friday Mosque. That's what I'm talking about with coincidence. The island built all of this infrastructure because it's where the government was seated for centuries. Infrastructure that connects the islands to each other and the outside world to let people get the vital imports they need, like food, fuel, and almost everything. It's where people work. If you work in the government or tourism industry or shipping, fishing, healthcare, education, there's a good chance you live in Malay, considering this is the bulk of what Maldivians do.
There's a KFC, and I'm trying to see if there's other ones that I know, but there's not. There's just one KFC. Okay.
There's a good chance a lot of them live in Malay, just because the things are here. It's what a buildup of political and economic momentum can do. But what about the other islands?
Here we
There's
go.
plenty of space on them to escape this cement jungle. The Maldives has over 1,000 islands in this long downward shape, but only around 190 of them are inhabited. These islands are then grouped into 20 atolls made up of multiple islands, and then 4 cities, each on only one.
4 cities. So Malay, which obviously looks massive. I guess this is the second major city. I can't say that. Kulhudhufushi. Kulhudhufushi. There we go. And then you got Fuvamula. That looks like this very small town, and then this is like in between.
One island.
Ada City.
Since 2010, there have been elected city councils, atoll councils, and even island councils. I bet the bid for elections is just who has more friends when your island is only a couple hundred people large. That's the thing with these islands. They can get really small or really large. Well, only one is really large. Rakitu has only around 80 people, but Hitadu has over 10,000, the most populous island outside of Malay. Yet most still only have 0. Islands full of jungle, beauty, bananas, papayas, and noni fruit.
Damn.
Which reminds me, agriculture in the Maldives is dismal. Although 10% of the land is dedicated to farms, most are small and on tiny distant islands. Fishing does help, but in order to get enough calories for the country, the Maldives is forced to import their food, especially rice. And so the population of these islands are very vulnerable to the outside world. It's why there are no tariffs on food, fuel, and fertilizers, despite tariffs making up a pretty substantial part of the government's revenue. So those on the atolls who are generally much younger live at much more risk and a lower standard of living than the older workers in Malay, if you could call this a lower standard of living than this. The Maldives also has a significant foreign worker population, nearly all male temporary workers, with many living in Malay and in resorts. That's right, living inside the resorts. What a nice life that must be.
Jeez.
Blue water, white sand, perfect temperatures. Just kidding. They're
Yeah.
the workers.
Just if you're living at your work your whole life, that's quite depressing.
I'm sure it's a lot less enjoyable for them. These resorts are probably the reason you've even heard of the Maldives in the first place.
Yeah.
Either because you dream of going to them or are just sick of hearing your coworkers talking about their Maldives holiday. It's not a surprise then that tourism is one of the country's largest industries. Let's put this into perspective. If you look up their imports and exports in 2021, they imported about $2.8 billion of goods while exporting only $240 million, most of that being fish. But if you add services with the goods, they import $3.6 billion and export over $4 billion. That's over a 16 times increase when adding services to their exports. Why? Because tourism is an export. It gives a service to a foreign customer, and in exchange, they give you foreign money. Around $3.5 billion of foreign receipts in 2021 alone. A third of their GDP.
3.5 billion for a country with that many people is insane. just from tourism alone.
Comes from tourism, as well as 60% of the foreign exchange they need to buy necessary imports. But unlike a normal export, the more tourism you give to foreigners, the more you need to build up your home country. Having received over 2 million tourists before COVID, that means there were 4 visitors for every resident. Does it get crowded? Not really. Except for Malé, though. That's the whole point of this video. This is because they have a one island, one resort policy, creating a sense of luxury tourism away from civilization. When tourists come, they don't go to the cities. They go to random islands in the outskirts to drink Bellinis in their bikinis. And with over 1,000 uninhabited islands to expand to, they still have plenty of room to grow. So since the 70s, both the government and private businesses have invested heavily into this industry. In terms of PB, private business, most of it comes from China, India, and Singapore in the form of infrastructure. You know, resorts, hotels, ports, harbors, and the China-Maldives Friendship Bridge. Because they're so dependent on this, they essentially have free investment and free flow of capital in and out of the country. They're in the South Asian Free Trade Agreement and have free trade with China, so it's not uncommon for a resort to be owned by Singaporeans, staffed by Indians, and sold to rich Chinese tourists. But it's not free investment. There are costs. Costs called confusing rules, unclear laws, competition with politically connected businessmen, corruption, and the fact that foreigners cannot own land, only lease it from the government for 50 years. If you want this put in a different way that's a little more real, the country has had 3 coup attempts in the 80s, 3 presidents have been arrested after their time in office, and the government is just generally corrupt and autocratic. Maybe even a little repressive, one might say. So because of the confusion, the Maldives ranks in the bottom 20 countries on the Economic Freedom Index and
I was not expecting that.
the bottom 50 on the Ease of Doing Business Index. The other investor doesn't care about these, though. It's the government. They've invested heavily into banking, shipping, communications, electricity, fisheries, canning factories, and of course, tourism since the 70s. The most important are these two, tourism and shipping, arguably what turned the Maldives into an upper middle income economy it is today. These didn't just transform the people, they transformed the government. 3/4 of government tax revenue comes from either tariffs, consumption taxes, or biggest of all, a tourism tax. So when COVID hit and people stayed
What is
home
allowed?
playing Animal Crossing instead of traveling across the world and ships stopped shipping, that hit the Maldives incredibly hard. Not only were thousands of people laid off when their major industries were severed, but government revenue was cut by 35% because it came mainly through these industries. They had to spend more with less money, especially to those in the rural atolls most dependent on government services and subsidies. So the debt doubled from 2019 to 2022. Not a great sitch to be in, but hey, that's the Maldives. How does this relate to Malay's population density though? Well, more tourism and shipping means more government revenue. More revenue means more development and central administration. More administration means more bureaucrats, and boom! More bureaucrats on the capital island means Malay becomes even denser. Because the Maldives developed into a decently rich nation, it meant the central capital developed more and built up to their city limits through bureaucracy. And yet, corruption or debt isn't even the greatest issue in the Maldives. There's one other issue that might give us a glimpse into their future, especially into Malay's future. Hint, it's more density. That problem is water, both too much of it and too little. The Maldives is one of the lowest countries on earth. Their highest point is right here.
That's the highest point. Flipping hell. God damn. Mount Vilingi Summit. Vilingi Summit. Wait, Vilingili. Mount Vilingili. Not very mountainous, but I guess it's the highest point.
Some random hill on a golf course standing at a proud 5.1 meters tall. The problem is, this ocean keeps getting higher and higher while the land stays at the same altitude, eating away at the country's beaches. Already, over 60% of islands report beach erosion, and 80% of islands are less than a meter high, making them extra susceptible. So there's understandable fear in the country. The Maldivian cabinet has even conducted this meeting underwater to get attention, and past President Salih has claimed that the country could cease to exist by the end of the century. Yikes. They've already experienced the power of water when the Indian Ocean tsunami hit the
Mate, a tsunami hitting the Maldives, fuck me, the whole country be wiped out.
country in 2004. Dozens were killed, nearly the whole nation flooded, and it cost hundreds of millions in damage. Do they really want to relive that again? Well, relive it at a much slower pace? The answer is no. So they've started building these funny structures, flood protection around the major islands, artificial coral reefs, and oh yeah, brand new islands too. Land reclamation is seen by many in the country as the way to beat the sea, both importing sand from overseas and pumping it up from the seafloor to build up new islands or expand previous ones. When I showed you what Malay looked like, I kind of ignored
So that's a fake island then?
this whole island connected to it, Hulhu Malay. Sometimes it's called Hope City because it may be a way to house Maldivians if their home islands get swallowed up. When it's completed dumping sand around it, it's estimated that 2/3 of the country could be housed between these two islands, making a massive Hulhu Lay metropolitan area. To be honest, it's not the greatest plan. The ocean isn't like a rising bathtub swallowing these islands up. They're constantly being shifted around by erosion and currents. So some of the land reclamation, which often ignores environmental regulations, are building over mangrove swamps, coral reefs, placing concrete blocks, and digging up sand which could move around the ocean currents, and it could lead to more problems down the line. Not to mention that most of the ocean protection plans are happening on these two tightly packed islands. Many resort islands who don't want the ugly sea barriers scaring away their customers are likely going to sink into the ocean within a century. But it is better than doing absolutely nothing about it. They're not going to all pack up and head to Australia like some other island quitters, which likely means a much more crowded
How do you build buildings onto structures like that are made by humans that are just full of sand? How can you put buildings on them? I'm so baffled as as to how that's possible.
capital in the future. Water will make the world's densest city even denser, or who knows, maybe people will leave from a lack of it. Almost every island has already run out of fresh water, with salt water eroding and leaking into their aquifer supplies. Now, the only way to drink clean water in the country is through either collecting rain, desalination plants, or importing bottled water. It rains a lot in the country, like rains an ungodly amount, but this is still such an unsustainable way to collect one of the most important resources we need. But when the whole country is unsustainable, what can you really do? I hope you're all excited for a new city-state to be added to this list. This time, in the ocean.
What the fuck?
Why is there...
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I mean, wasn't just about Malé, but it's a fascinating place to me. I'm not gonna lie, this place really does baffle me in the coolest possible way. I knew the Maldives as a whole was densely populated, and of course, their largest city and capital would be even more densely populated. But I had no idea their population was so concentrated in one small spot. As a Dutch, I hope both the Maldives and the Kingdom of the Netherlands are able to survive the 21st century, despite is the Netherlands getting scared as well? I don't know. I'm glad Hoser is here to fill up with his content. Yeah, it's a fascinating place. I do really enjoy these types of videos. Let me know your thoughts on this place. Have you been to this city before, or have you been to the Maldives before? I assume a few of you definitely will have been here. And yeah, if you did go here before, did you go to the capital city? Because that's the place that fascinates me. Obviously, you've got all these incredible islands that I'm sure every human on this planet would love to go to. But yeah, the capital city does fascinate me a lot. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed, and until next time, like, subscribe. Peace.